Hello and welcome to All the Way Down, a YouTube channel all about the Scottish rock band Biffy Clyro.
All the way down, all the way down.
So for this video I thought I'd start to look at side projects. Marmaduke Duke is sort of the main one. There is another one that Simon Neil did come up with under a different guise. But Marmaduke Duke have released 2 albums. We'll probably get to this in the main bulk of the video, but it would be a mistake of me to mention Marmaduke Duke but not mention the record label change that happened after the first 3 albums. And in the main video I do a bit of a timeline of what happens when in terms of album releases and changes of labels. I found it quite interesting. Hope you do too, and I'll see you on the other side. A description online describes Marmaduke Duke as a conceptual rock duo from Ayrshire, Scotland, comprising of Simon Neil of Biffy Clyro and JP Reid of Pero. Since you clicked on this video, I like to think you're aware of who Simon Neil is, but if you're unaware of the latter, here's a quick roundup. Pero are a Scottish rock band formed in 2002 and fronted by Simon Neil's cousin JP Reid. They've released 4 albums, and I fully recommend their first one, Random Acts of Intimacy. It's great. I saw them support Rubin in 2007 and met JP Reid after their set. He was a lovely fella. Probably still is. Within the band, the duo perform under the pseudonyms The Atmosphere and The Dragon, respectively. According to Neil, the band and its albums are based on a trilogy of unreleased manuscripts that a friend of ours brought to this country a few years ago. We're really just working on the soundtrack to those stories. To provide more context to the band's story, it's worth looking at the timeline of events around the time Marmaduke Duke were active, as I'm probably right in thinking that their emergence and creativity was triggered by vital moments in Biffy Clyro's history. So let's take a look. In June 2003, Biffy's second album, The Vertigo of Bliss, was released under the Scottish label Beggars Banquet, a label they'd signed to 2 years earlier when they were spotted at Tea in the Park Festival. Online, Marmaduke Duke apparently formed in the same year, but recording and touring commitments to their own respective bands set things back. So with the duo reportedly forming a year earlier, Biffy continued touring, releasing Infinity Land in June 2004, the final album released by Beggars Banquet. There's no real details about the initial contract with Beggars Banquet, but judging from Simon's comments in a 2007 article for The Guardian, it seems like the split from the label was not a simple one. It states, knowing they needed a bigger budget to do justice to their 4th album, the band moved to a major label, but found themselves at the mercy of the resultant negotiations between Beggars Banquet and 14th Floor, a subsidiary to Warner's, which dragged on for more than a year. Simon said, "We decided to make the most fun music we could possibly make, to remind ourselves why we do this." After releasing their first 3 albums, Biffy was signed to 14th Floor Records. This was only announced in 2006, however, 2 years after the release of Infinity Land. This must have left Biffy with a lot of time on their hands, considering that the possible legal wrangle to get the band away from Beggars Banquet and onto 14th Floor lasted so long. It could have been the spark of frustration and creativity that led Simon Neil and JP Reid to kickstart the band. An album named The Magnificent Duke was released in April of 2005, not under Beggars or 14th Floor, but under an independent record label called the Captains of Industry. Based in London and Durham in the UK, the label announced their launch in 2003 as a self-funded experiment in art and commerce. With a plan to exist for 5 years, they ceased trading while in profit in 2008. They released material by artists including Hell is for Heroes, Kinesis, Pero, and Marmaduke Duke's first album, The Magnificent Duke. I remember being very torn over this album and very unsure about its premise when I first started listening to it. I found myself skipping every 3rd song as I found them too abrasive at times, even deleting them from my iPod. It's an 18-song album consisting of 3 sections, 1 heavy rock, 1 entirely acoustic, and 1 with just 2 bass guitars. There are some fantastic songs on there though. The Kill and the Cure sounds like it could have been a spur track from Infinity Land, with its jaggy snake-like ka-ka-kas, and The Beaver and the Rabbit is raucous and grungy, with Psy screaming over feedback and spiky riffs. It's worth noting here that prior to this album, acoustic album tracks were hard to come by in the world of Biffy Clyro, so to have a third of an album devoted to it was a refreshing change. Remember, this was before they seemingly felt obliged to put an acoustic track on every album. The Imposter and the Magician is my highlight, with Simon and JP sharing singing duties over a dark and solemn guitar line. I Bet You Love the Way You Feel, with magical legs and shins of steel. It's an album that's lyrically obscure and very loose instrumentally, but in essence, it sounds like two musicians doing exactly what they want, something they planned to do in the first place. In 2007, Biffy Clyro released their fourth album, Puzzle, the first under their new label. It spawned 6 singles and reached number 2 in the UK album charts. You could tell at the time this was a big step for the band, with more radio play, bigger venues on tour, and even managing to secure legendary artist Storm Thorgerson to begin his campaign with the band's sparse and striking visuals. A year later, a new album from the band was released, but it took a lot of people by surprise. An 11-track album, featuring all the singles so far from their time at Beggars Banquet, and that landed in July 2008. At the time, their tour manager wrote on the website, "It looks like Beggars will finally do what they've threatened to do, and release the singles compilation. The band have chosen not to be involved with this release, beyond requesting that Beggars don't attempt to create a new album. It would have been awesome if the B-sides from that period had surfaced as a compilation, but what can you do?" A BBC review of the album continues with the negativity, stating that this album is little more than Biffy's former label Beggars Banquet cashing in on neophyte fans. Marmaduke Duke's story continued in 2009, with a small tour and new album announcement at the start of the year. An NME review from their final gig at the Glasgow School of Art states, "When they emerge in gimp masks and feather garlands, Neil throws himself 20 feet in the air from the PA speakers to a soundtrack of sense-assaulting punk rock fury, and he's not even the star of his own show. That honour falls to the mysterious, white-suited dandy named the Duke, who glides around the stage like a nightmarish vision of Bez, reimagined as a gauche pansexual lounge lizard." I remember being very disappointed I couldn't make the Manchester date of this tour, leaving me to fawn over photos that were posted on the Biffy forums. It looked like absolute pandemonium, and that's quite a fitting description. Shortly after the tour, Marmaduke Duke's second album was released, this time under Biffy's new record label 14th Floor. Duke Pandemonium showed a different side to the sound, with disco-infused grooves, pulling focus from more transparent lyrics. The album reached the number 14 spot in the UK charts, and I remember Rubber Lover being very popular on Radio 1 when it was released. Its catchy hook, a Billy Joel sample, taking it to number 12 in the singles charts. Simon described this as a far more cohesive album. It's a lot easier on the ear too. It seems to come from a more contented place compared to the first record. You can still hear artistic freedom in this album, but like the album cover, it's brighter and provides a lot more colour. The song Demon is a sprawling 8 minutes long with 3 parts that has moments of real beauty, and Kid Gloves feels like a sister song to Biffy's Born on a Horse, with its synth lead and skippy drums. Biffy's fifth album, Only Revolutions, was released in November 2009, and in the same year, an online interview with Loud and Quiet was published, stating, "It's taken 4 years for Simon Neil and JP Reid to soundtrack 2/3 of Duke's rotten life, namely due to their other band's downtime, rarely aligning to work on more Marmaduke Duke material. But whether they conclude this project next year, or within another 4, the end is in sight. The Duke must die. In their alter ego guises, the Atmosphere and the Dragon promise a spectacular ending to this depraved ordeal." In the interview, Dragon says, "Yeah, it has to be 3 records. It's a much more romantic notion, because otherwise, what reason would we have to keep it together? There are only 3 manuscripts." In the Dragon's home studio, Marmaduke Duke was conceived almost by accident. The want to complete this planned trilogy was always there, but the Magnificent Duke ended up being made without trying, as Simon and JP picked up instruments while having a casual drink one evening. Duke Pandemonium was created out of a more conscious decision to write a second record. It was over a decade later when we heard from the duo again. The NME published an article in May 2020 where Simon stated they've been so close to finishing a new album for about 2 years. With the Biffy train up and running again after lockdown, who knows when the final Marmaduke Duke album will appear? What started off as a little project to pass the time over a drink continued into mainstream success alongside Biffy Clyro. There's no real way of knowing what's next, and I suppose that's the beauty of it. So there we are, Marmaduke Duke, as we are at this moment. There are 2 albums, and something that I didn't mention in the book of the video is that, and you actually saw it as part of an article, is that the 3rd album is called, or going to be called, The Death of the Duke. Don't think it's been recorded, no release date, but obviously we'll come to that once both members of the band have got a bit of time. And another thing I didn't mention in the video is that when Marmaduke Duke did that tour in 2009, and you've probably seen from the couple of pictures, they did have more of a band around them. It wasn't just Simon Neil and JP Reid. You probably would have recognised them. Ben on drums and James on the bass, but they also had another drummer for that tour, which I thought was amazing at the time, and that was Fergus Munro, who is the drummer from Susio Pero. So it was kind of a merging both bands together for that tour. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you for the next one.